Well, as this cool, crisp fall air begins to set in and the days grow shorter, we realize that we are moving closer and closer to another year. And I know this one we are ready to close the books on and hope that the next one will be less stressful. But somehow Jesus keeps asking us to think about how we want to live, even while life is this uncertain. Rather than hunkering down and waiting for better days, we are invited to keep investing in the future with what we have right now. And the story that we have read today builds on the one from last week. Last week, that story about people waiting for a grand wedding party, waiting for a reason to celebrate, for life to be the way that in our hearts we know it should be. Now, in our scriptures today, we get another story. Jesus, at this point in time, is on his way to face his enemies, facing them in a confrontation that is not going to end well. And so he wants his followers, his friends, to understand what is most important in life. And he encourages his followers to live purposefully. Right now, right here, there's no way to know how long we have, not as individuals, not as a culture, not even as human life as we know it. And yet it does matter how we live our lives while we are alive. So Jesus has tried to say, in many ways, don't sit around calculating when you think the end of time is coming. Use the time that you have wisely. And he knows we remember best in stories, so he gives another story. This time he says, think of your life this way. It's as if a man is going on a journey and he summoned his employees and he entrusted all of his finances to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another just 1, according to their ability. Well, so maybe imagine that your boss or a wealthy relative calls you into their office and you go in curious and a little nervous to find out that you have been given $1 million to invest for the next year. Because a talent was a lot of money. It equaled more than 15 years of pay for a day laborer. So it might actually be like getting $5 million or $2 million or $1 million. A lot of responsibility. So if your boss or your relative gave you a couple $1 million to invest while he or she was traveling for a year or so, what would your reaction be? Some of you, I suspect, would see this as an exciting challenge, particularly if you know this investor was open to risky investments. You'd be like that first servant, taking your $5 million and going for it. And on the other hand, some of you might be more cautious with money. I would probably be more like the last guy in our story. Like, I don't want this much responsibility. What if I invest it wrong and choose the wrong company and I lose it all? I don't want this. We react differently, but we can all agree that it is important that we use our financial resources wisely. And that's lovely, but that is not what Jesus is talking about here. If it's not about that, what is this story about? What is it that we have been given in abundance, more than we could have earned in a lifetime, more than we could ever deserve based on our intelligence or character or skills? That would be the unconditional love and grace from the one who gave us life. What we have received that we can either choose to hoard for ourselves or we can risk sharing with others. We have received life and love, forgiveness and compassion, a sense of worth and meaning that springs from this experience that we are having of being known and loved and cared for. So Jesus is not talking about money here. He's talking about love. Love which is not a commodity to exchange, but a relationship that is constantly given and received. So with this in mind, maybe those first two servants don't represent good financial advisors or investors. In this parable, they stand for people who are servants of the God of love, sharing what they have received. Maybe they represent the people who know the character of God to be so compassionate that God does in fact love those who don't deserve it. The God who keeps on loving even the people that we might prefer not to associate with because, well, their problems are their own fault anyway. The God who invites us into the risky business of loving others in this real, complicated, everyday life. So those first two servants risk investing the love they received into the life of others, and in doing so, they increase the amount of love that flows through the world. Now, the third servant, who seems so frugal and fearful, represents those who have not truly understood the character of God or accepted the love that is offered. And notice it is the fearful servant in this story who believed the owner to be harsh and unfair. Now, David Lowes points out that this is actually what happens in our relationship to God. If we imagine God primarily as an enforcer of rules, we get hung up in the legalism of religion. If we visualize God as stern and prone to punishment, we come to believe that everything bad in our lives is some sort of punishment. When we see God as arbitrary and capricious, that's what we experience, a fickle, unsympathetic God who meets our expectations of just sowing confusion. But on the other hand, if we view God primarily in terms of grace, then we are surprised and uplifted by the numerous gifts and moments of grace that we do experience all around us. Instead of seeing things that happen to us and around us as punishment or signs that we are failing, we notice what we have to be grateful for. We notice the happy and the helpful coincidences, the opportunities that we get to try again, to keep growing and to keep learning. It matters how you envision God because that makes all the difference in how you invest your life. Is God loving or judgmental or eager for peace? Or is God prone to violence? Does the picture that you carry in your mind and heart match the picture of God that we know in Jesus? Does that image that you have leave you fearful or calm and emboldened to reach out and to take some chances? So the money in this story is a symbol of the love that God has invested in us. And love that is given away multiplies. Love that is hoarded seems to disappear right before our eyes because we can't hide it. We can't save it for the future. Now, looking at this story this way makes sense out of the ending of the story, where Jesus says, "For to all those who have more will be given, and they will have an abundance, and from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away." It's not so much an act of punishment or a taking away. It's more about the results of the life we have chosen to live. So maybe that outer darkness that the fearful man landed in could point to the empty, lonely existence that we experience when we choose not to share our capacity for love and care and creativity with others in this life because we are afraid. And it is totally understandable that if someone has been raised their whole lives and only known conditional love, love that can be taken away if we don't act right or do the right thing or say the right thing, if that has been our experience, it is easy to want to hold on to love and hoard it if we experience the real thing. If you've never had more than you need, it still feels like there's never going to be enough. And here's the difference in our story. Here's the catch that catches us every time. Even if you do take the love that you have received and you hoard it and you hide it and you try to bury it in a hole in the ground so that you will never lose it, you will not be thrown into the outer darkness. For unlike the landowner or your boss or maybe your wealthy relative, God will love you no less, no matter what you choose. Because God understands where you're coming from. God knows the trauma that you have been through. God understands where your fear is coming from. So this heavenly parent who gave you life will not ever let you go. The Spirit will just keep reminding you with that divine nudge that says, you know, if you give it away, it will grow. Because God's love is at the core of the universe. And our purpose for being here is to share it. And we have choices every day how we will invest our time, our skills, our energy, our thoughts, and our words. How will we do this in the good times and the hard times? How will we share and grow the love that we have been given, the love that is so needed in this uncertain world in these unusual times? So let us encourage one another. Let us do this together. And now let us sing.